Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun cash flow forecasting software, where we help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind and model anything from cash flow through to complex scenarios with clarity and control. And joining me today is James Oliver of Atlas Bars, where they make real food that is high in protein, low in sugar, and convenient. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I always like to start and find out, when did you get that first little inkling that you may want to be an entrepreneur?
I think it was when I was in middle school, and there was a kid in my middle school grade who had started a hot dog stand where he was selling hot dogs. And I think there was like an article written about him in the local paper. And I was like, that's cool. I want to do that. He was making he made like a couple $1,000s a month. But
Wow.
when you're 10 years old, 11 years old, that's a lot of money. And I remember seeing that and I was like, that's really cool. That's cool to be able to create something that others interact with and that others can enjoy, but also have virtually complete control over your destiny in a way that not many other things allow you to.
Well, boy, that sets a bar high.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't a full-time job either. So that's good money by any measure, because I'm
Yeah.
sure he's doing this on the side. But man, the one of the things that I know that most entrepreneurs I talk with, and definitely with me, one of the things that I found really appealing is it's not just the freedom to grow, like to build something, but it's the idea that there isn't a salary cap. Like, we might not make anything, but we might also make a lot more than we had, than the 9 to 5 for 25 years or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. The double-edged sword. It's the risk and the reward when you're working in a more typical W-2 or salaried role, whatever it is. The bands are much narrower. Sure, you can make a bit more, you can get a bonus, you can make a bit more, maybe you have a pay cut, but the bands are a lot narrower. Whereas when you're on the entrepreneurial route, the bands are much wider. It's effectively uncapped downside where you can lose everything, and uncapped upside too, where you can virtually gain as much as you're able to produce. So yeah, it's both, I think, intimidating and also alluring for people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And entrepreneurs, I think by nature, they ignore the risk or they don't ignore it, but they don't believe that it's going to apply to them, especially early on. You're like, no, I get that, but no, I'm on to something here. And all you can see is the opportunity. And then usually about 10 minutes in, reality starts to hit.
Yeah.
It starts to get a little bit more challenging. So what did you, let's sort of move forward here. And where did you sort of dive into an entrepreneurial role kind of after high school or after university, or what was your sort of thought process as you started to move along and you had this at least a bit of an attraction to it?
I definitely dabbled. Like, I think a lot of people have stories about whether it's trading cards or something that they're like flipping at a young age in order to get their feet wet in buying and selling, and basically it's a form of like arbitrage, but you're just doing it with like baseball cards as opposed to larger amounts and larger risk. And for me, I think the first thing I did it with playing cards. I did it with there's a video game that I played, and I realized that you could sell these cards. They're very expensive. You could sell them for like $900 for a single card. And I saw on eBay that they were selling for like $500 or $600. So I asked my parents to front me the $500 or $600, and then I bought it, and then I sold it, and then I paid them back, and I just kept the difference. And I did that when I was, I think, like 11 or 12. And then in high school, I did landscape. I effectively had a landscaping business where I would just do landscaping for other folks. And I remember I didn't like to be paid by the hour, because I said to them, like, hey, an hourly rate, it incentivizes me to work slower. Like, if you have a garden that I need to weed, then my like economic incentive is to spend, even if I can do it in 2 hours, my economic incentive is like, well, you should do it in 10 hours because you're going to make 5 times more money than if you do it in 2 hours. So I would always push for a project based rate, because then I was like, well, then our incentives are aligned, because if you're like, I'll pay you $100 to weed my garden, I'm like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to try and do it as like quickly and efficiently as possible, as opposed
Mhm.
to the hourly way. So I was always attracted to doing those things that had more, that had alignment between what your output was and what the payment structure was. So that actually led me to, in college, I ended up selling knives, Cutco knives, because that's very similar, where I don't even think there's a base hourly rate. And it's really, it's a pretty high commission structure. Like at one point I was making 30%, I think, of whatever I sold. And the average knife set is like it's like $1,200 or so. So if you
Mm.
spend an hour with somebody and you can sell them a $1,200 knife set, you're making basically $400 for that hour of work. So there was definitely, just thinking back, there was definitely like a pattern where I was just dabbling in all these different things that all had a similar flavor to them. And then that ended up in me actually starting a formal business once I got out of school.
Well, and it's kind of another, I guess, unifying thread I see a lot is that entrepreneurs are always looking at opportunity, but have this natural instinct for finance. Like there's you know, how I can build out a profit margin where it makes sense and everything. Um, but also sales is so important for entrepreneurs. And you know, I experienced the same sort of thing when I was in university. I worked for a painting company and for a summer or two, and you know, and I wanted to be paid by the job rather than again hourly because I could be efficient. But then I found I could make more money by appointment setting. I could just go door to door and I could book appointments like left and right. And this is way better, you know, like because and everyone else was quite, I think, intimidated by it. But I was just like, man, no, this makes a lot more money for me, right? It's just I felt it was easy doing that sales sort of side. Um, so wait, tell me about that first job when you kind of took that leap.
So the landscaping or the knife one, or when I started my
That
company, which
yeah, when you started this company, like what I guess
yeah,
what convinced you to take this leap first of all?
I did a lot of work up front to de-risk it, because I I think I honestly am fairly risk averse by nature. And so the way that I approached this was pretty incremental. So the first thing that I did was, one, I felt that I had a pretty good sense of what the market is, because I was a consumer and I was effectively scratching my own itch. And
Mm,
that's
mhm,
like common advice, I think, for a lot of people who are starting, that scratch your own itch, because if you scratch your own itch, you are doing something in an area of competence that you're probably pretty familiar with. So you probably know what the landscape looks like, where there might be gaps, who the competitors are, what the weakness is, et cetera, et cetera. And so I already had a pretty good, I didn't just like pick a random space and wander into it. I had a pretty good sense, because I was already what I would say like a super consumer of the
mm,
space. So I already had an idea of where there were gaps. So there's that aspect of it. And then I I was taking a class at the time that was called Entrepreneurial Finance. And as part of the capstone for that, you had to do a like 30 or 40-page business plan for a hypothetical business. And I was like, well, I'll just use this as an opportunity to do this. And it was funny, because it was taught by a professor, a visiting professor from Harvard Business School. And I remember he he gave me, I think he gave me an A on it, but the what he wrote at the top of it was, this is a extremely crowded category. And I think he like underlined and he capitalized like extremely, basically saying like, don't actually think about doing this. Which was, in hindsight, you do have to have a little bit of like naivete that you can, or stubbornness, whatever you want to call it, that like at the time I was 21, 22, and this person who obviously is much more experienced than me, they're telling me basically not to do this thing. And you have to throw caution to the wind a bit and say, yeah, I understand that he's a lot more experienced than me and he probably knows more than me, but I'm still going to go ahead and do it. So I
mm,
did that as the second phase. And then the third phase, which really gave me the kind of the confidence to go ahead and actually commit money to it, was I sent out a survey to who I thought my prospective customers were, because I had this idea, a hypothesis that there was a need in the market for this. But
mhm,
it's one thing to have a hypothesis, it's another thing to actually have people tell you that, yeah, we actually want this. So I sent out a survey to a bunch of, at the time I put together a list of all of the CrossFit owners in the Boston area, which was a list of, it was like 150 people at that point. And I just sent out a cold email and said like, hey, I'm a student doing a project in school and would love your feedback on this. And I described what the product was hypothetically, because I didn't have it at that point. And I said, how likely would you be to purchase this? And 100% of the people that responded said they would be willing to purchase it. And I was like, okay, this is the first sign where it's now out of my head and it's in the real world. And I'm getting
Mhm.
positive feedback from a slice of the market that this is something that people actually want. So that gave me enough confidence to then say, okay, I'm going to put in, at the time it was like $5,000 or $10,000 of my savings. Like, I'm going to put this in to bring this to life, to make it a reality. And then I'm just going to see if I can sell them. And that's what I did. So my last year of school, I lined up the production. The production got shipped to me right when I finished school, and then I started going door to door and trying to sell them.
There's a few interesting themes there that I think sort of came up, and one was that you worked to de-risk it. And I remember because my dad, who's not an entrepreneur at all, but someone had mentioned to him, here's a book that you should read, that he should give to me, right? And because I was like just a couple of years out of school too, and I'm already dabbling, and I remember, I don't even remember the name of the book anymore, but I remember just one of the things that is said in there is that entrepreneurs are they're the best entrepreneurs limit risk. That is a real earmark of an entrepreneur. And as I looked at that, that really changed my mindset, because I think felt like I was risk averse. When you look back on it, um, both of us have taken like big risks. Like, this is a highly challenging sort of building product sort of idea, is really risky, but that's one of the earmarks of success, is that you limit risk because you have to take it. But how do understanding it and how accommodate it is really, really important. And then the other thing that I found interesting was the crowded market space. But your professor wasn't an expert in the market, and you were, and you saw a gap. You knew there was a gap there. That's the same thing we've done here at Dryrun. Like, there's more finance apps out there than you can throw a stick at, but we kind of fill a need that nobody seems to be doing a good job at. Like, nobody's really touching it. So you find that gap, right? And um, so tell me a little bit about the need you saw, like the product itself. What was that need that you saw? And what was the problem in the market space?
So it was really a problem. My logic was that, okay, I am a very big consumer of this space. I really want this product. It doesn't exist. And if I want this product, I am assuming, or my hypothesis is that there are other people in this market, because it's a very large market. There are other people who also
Mhm.
want this product. And as I did research, I was like, okay, this is a $5 billion market. So even if you make a company that has 1% market share, that's a $50 million company. So that's a pretty
Mhm.
significant company. And to answer your question about what I saw that I knew that there are a couple of companies that were really successful, some on the nutrition side. So they had made products that were really successful because they were high protein and low sugar, but they had used ingredients that were more artificial, more processed. And then I saw another company that had made products that were built on the value proposition of clean, real ingredients, but they didn't have the best nutrition. They were higher sugar, not the most protein. And so I was looking at that and I was like, well, this company clearly has validated the customer, or the demand for high protein, low sugar products. And this company has clearly validated it for clean ingredients. So if you fuse those two together, which is what I was looking for, like, I just wanted something that was made with clean, real food ingredients that had a lot of protein, didn't have a lot of sugar, and I couldn't find it. So I figured, based on what I saw in the market and based on my own need, that there was probably others who would also desire this product if it existed. And that's where, when I heard that, exactly what you said, when I got that feedback from the professor, I was like, I know he's very intelligent and has a lot more experience than I do, but with this specific thing, I think that I can just see something that he can't because I know the space very, very well.
Yeah, yeah. And so what, tell me a little bit about, like, I've seen these protein bars. I've had one of your bars. I thought they were terrific, but, I don't know much about the space. Like, so you said you're a big, like, consumer of it. What were these things you were like, you mentioned, CrossFit. Were these things that people take, like, eat when they're, about to work out or after workout, or they go for a hike, or what are they kind of most commonly, for, I guess?
It's a great question. And I think there's a bit of a misconception here because they're often marketed as like a pre-workout or post-workout around some kind of activity. But if you look at how most people actually consume them, most people are consuming them just sitting at a computer, sitting at a desk doing work. They just
Yeah.
use them as a snack or a meal replacement. So the marketing would, I think, have you believe that, yeah, you have one in your gym bag, and people definitely do have it for that. But I do think that's the minority. And I think the majority of people are grabbing one as they go out the door on the way to work. They're having it on their commute, or they're having it at their desk. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would guess that that's like 60 or 70% of how people are consuming the product. And because we live in a world that is increasingly mobile and people are increasingly moving around, and they also want convenience. They also want clean, healthy food. That has created a bit of an underswell for this type of product, which is exactly that. And that's why I made it. I hadn't mentioned this, but I initially made it because I was going over to China for 6 months to live there, and I wanted something that I could take with me, so that was portable, convenient, and that I could just have in my bag to kind of supplement my diet while I was there. So
Mhm.
the use case that I wanted for myself is actually pretty similar to what people use it for today.
And, so often the best ideas that they seem so obvious, and yet nobody's tackled them. And like you said, the idea of, uh, clean, natural ingredients, but not high in sugar seems like a natural, because those are the types of things that if I was looking for a bar, that's exactly what I'd be looking for. I want clean, natural ingredients. I don't want everything that I don't even know what they are, and it's highly processed. I don't want that. I also don't want a ton of sugar, even if it's natural sugar and not corn syrup. I don't want that. And so when I saw, your description and what you guys do, I'm like, how is this such a massive gap? But it is, because I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever seen that combo of, yeah, it's natural and also not high in sugar. Like, it
Yeah.
seems, you know, um, but that's what happens so often with entrepreneurs, is they see an opportunity, and they understand it, and they believe in it, and they run with it. And it surprises me a little bit, but it doesn't surprise me, because so often people do have, I guess, blinders on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I I completely agree. And I think something that I've realized is that a lot of the companies that you look at that are some of the most successful companies, the ideas that they have, they're actually pretty simple ideas. Like if you take Amazon, for instance, like Amazon's entire value proposition is basically like massive selection, low prices, delivery as fast as possible. Like it's a
Mhm.
very simple value proposition, but the execution of that is extremely
Yeah,
complex. And I think people think that they need to come up with a like crazy novel breakthrough, and you really don't need to do that. You need to come, I think a lot of the times history would show that you come up with a very simple value proposition and then just execute on it
yeah,
relentlessly.
yeah, yeah. We've said a million times that, it like I say, ideas are worthless. I probably
Yeah.
say it in a little bit more colorful language than that, but it it's true that ideas it's a prerequisite. You have to have a good idea. You have to have that opportunity, but then it's all built on execution. And so I want to explore this a little bit. Like, I come from, a software background, and even before that, still very much, kind of creative agency. That's what I had before Dryrun. So I don't know that much about how you get a physical product like this off the ground, and I want to explore a little bit into that bit of that execution side. So you're still in school and you're saying, okay, I want to get some products so I can get out there and sell this. I think there's something there and I'm going to take a run at it. Where did you start? Where did you go to say, okay, I'm making a food product. How do I get the product made? How do I get it so it's, I don't know what the legalities are, um, packaging, how long it has a shelf life, all these things. How did you kind of learn about all of that?
So I remember there's a fork in the road, and there's a fork in the road, I think, for pretty much any physical goods company. You have to make a decision. Do I want to manufacture this product myself, or do I want to find somebody that manufactures this? Do I just want to focus on the design and the marketing of this, or do I want
Mm,
to actually manufacture it? And I remember thinking about that for a long time, because if you manufacture it, then you become a manufacturer. You don't just become a brand, you become an actual manufacturer. And there's there's no there's no right answer for this. If you look at some of the most successful companies, like Apple has never manufactured their own products. Nike has never manufactured their own products. They just focus on the marketing, the branding. Sure, they do the product design, but they don't own the factories that are making the iPhones or that are making your Nikes. But then there are
mhm,
other companies that do. And so it really depends on, I think, what you want your focus to be and what you want your competency to be. In my case, I knew that I was a very limited bandwidth, and though I do like the idea of manufacturing because it gives you complete control and you have complete vertical integration, I realized early on that you should really focus on building the brand, focusing on sales and marketing, let
mhm,
somebody else handle the manufacturing. So I found a contract manufacturer who I worked with to basically make a commercialized version of a formula. I already had a formula that I had actually worked on the outline with my mom, who's very good at pretty much anything culinary. So I went to them and I said, "Hey, can you help me basically turn this into from a kitchen project into a commercializable food?" They were great. They helped out. They did all the FDA regulations, made sure everything was compliant. So I didn't have to worry about that, and I could kind of
mhm,
learn that alongside them as opposed to learning that completely on my own. And
mhm,
then they shipped me. They produced, I think it was 5,000 bars at the time, shipped them to me. And I remember looking at them. They got to my parents' house in my dining room. And I can remember very clearly the stack of boxes and it was like, it's funny because I think we sell the amount that I received, I think we sell that amount like in a day now. But I remember looking at it and just being like, oh my God, how am I going to sell all of this? Because if you're starting anything, I think of it like almost like a fire. Like you are the spark that needs to light the fire. Like you have to provide the energy that starts the fire, which then becomes the company. And there's
mhm,
no momentum. You have nothing to start with. So you have to use all of your own energy in order to start the company. And so how when you asked how did I start it, I went back to those CrossFit owners and I was like, okay, I want to focus on really proving that there is product market fit here. So I really want to make sure that I know that I've sent them a survey. I know that they've said, okay, yes, I'm interested in purchasing this, but it's very different between somebody just clicking a response and somebody actually giving you their money.
oh
So
yeah,
I wanted to make
yeah,
sure that people would actually pay for it. I spent the first year really just, I drove around to every gym in the Boston area, and I did basically cold cold calling sales, walking into the gym completely like unannounced, like Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman, just going door to door. And I would just ask them, like, hey, can I come by and just sample the product to your members? And if they like it, then maybe we can talk about you carrying it here. And if not, then no worries. So I tried to make it for them. I don't know if you have experienced this in sales, but I try to make it like a no brainer for them. So
mhm,
completely de risk the decision for them because there's no downside to them if they don't. I'm not asking them to pay anything. I'm just saying, hey, can I come in? This is like a perk for your members. Like it gives them something interesting to look forward to. And if it works, then great. And we can talk about
mhm.
what you carrying them would look like. But if not, you have lost nothing in the process. So I think that's a really helpful way for me, at least, to think about um, sales because you de-risk or you bring risk to zero for the person that you're trying to persuade.
Yeah, we're always looking at where do we reduce friction, but one of the conversations we have is it's not about us, and we have to sell to the customer the way they want to buy. and we've recently have made a pivot, sort of moved quite a bit up market from where we were. Completely different everything from lead gen and everything all the way through, but the sales cycle itself is very different. And it's so much about getting to like understanding it, what makes it a no-brainer for them and what makes them comfortable with how you're selling it. And you have to learn that. You have to figure it out, because if you don't, you just keep running into these little walls and you don't know why. And a lot of times it's because you're thinking internally about what we want, not externally about what they want, right? And it's yeah, and that's just how it's you have to take every step too. That's the hard part, is you want to walk in and just sell the bars, but it's like, no, you have to convince them first that it's there's no
Yeah,
there's no freebie, right? Um,
totally.
so how did that go? How did that initial pilot go for you?
It went great. Yeah, it went. I mean, it was obviously challenging, especially for myself. I would categorize myself more as a introvert than a natural extrovert. Like I don't walk into a room and I'm not shaking hands like I'm running for mayor. I can do it if I need to, but it's
Mhm.
definitely outside of my comfort zone. So the
Yeah.
knife selling that I mentioned before, the knife selling was a very good proving ground for that skill. It helped me exercise that muscle because with that, in hindsight, it's kind of it's a lot to ask a college student to do. You're effectively just cold calling people and you're saying, "Hey, can I come by and do a 45-minute knife demonstration for you in your kitchen?" And when you do that a couple hundred times, it kind of desensitizes you to it. So that
Mhm.
was really helpful, and that was a really good, I think, prerequisite for me then just walking into all these places and being like, "Hey, I you have no idea who I am, but I made this product. I think you and your members could enjoy it." So I did that for the first year, and I knew that I knew in the back of my mind that that was never going to scale. You can't scale a company. I can't drive to every single gym in the United States and sell the
Yeah.
product that way. So I really was looking at that as really just like tuning the product and the brand so that once that was tuned and once I was like, okay, this, I feel like we've worked out the bugs. I feel like we've worked out the kinks. This is ready to really scale. Then we can focus on that. So that was really the second year was more focused on that aspect of things. And that's really how it how it worked. So I turned instead of going from door to door, I then turned attention to e-commerce because again, I was like, I only have myself. I have limited bandwidth. E-commerce is a perfect platform for that because the inputs are detached from the outputs. You can have like at the time, I think Instagram a couple of years before. Actually, that was far before, but Instagram. I remember hearing that they had sold to Facebook for $1 billion and they had 13 employees, and that just I remember that planting a seed in my head that oh, like software, as you know, like software is completely detached from the amount of people or the amount of manpower that it takes. Like it
Mhm.
scales, and that's why it's like arguably the best business model humans have ever created because there's no marginal cost to software, and you can scale it from one user to a billion users. Obviously, you have to add servers and all of that, but you don't have to make more widgets. You don't have to make more widgets.
Yeah, yeah. I wish it was quite that. There's
Yeah,
easier.
I know
It's
there's more to it.
well, no, it's just one of those things that yeah, you learn the hard way. You learn
Yeah,
those the parts that there's always trade offs. There's obviously the competition is really fierce because of that. There's so
yeah,
many little things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about like the move from okay, you've validated this product, you know you've got a market here. Um, move moving to that this is always a really risky part for business is you're going okay, I've got to move to something that is more scalable. I've got to move to something that like rolling out an e-commerce platform makes perfect sense. Also all new, right? So how did you take that next step to say okay, here this makes sense, this can solve our problem, but now it's another you know area of expertise you may not have, right? How did you take that step?
I think I did the same thing that helped me start the business in the first place, which was just try and be a sponge. I'm a very curious person and very open-minded, almost to my detriment sometimes, where I'll just always be trying to absorb information from people and learn from people. And like when I first was like, I think I want to start a company that's in the food space, I just bought a bunch of books and I just started reading books on. There's a book that was like how to start a food company. And so I read that cover to cover. I read a couple of other books. There's actually books by both of the bar company Cliff Bar and the bar
Mm.
company Kind Bar. Both of the founders of those companies had written books, so I just I bought both those books and I read both of those because I was uh, going back to the conversation on de-risking. I would rather spend 2 hours reading a book and learning somebody else's mistakes than spending months of my life and God knows how much money making the same mistakes that could have been prevented just by
Mhm.
reading about them in a book. So I tried to do the same thing with e-commerce, and I tried to learn as much as I could. It's not at that time still, I mean, e-commerce is still fairly young as an industry, all
Mhm.
things considered. It's 20, 30 years old, which is very young when you look at the entire
Yep.
scale of commerce. So there weren't like manuals at the time, and it changes. I mean, even now it's changing very rapidly. But I just tried to absorb as much information as possible and tried to learn and tried to make sure that we were just making as few mistakes as possible. So yeah, I don't have a clean answer. It was really just I know that I don't know a lot, and I know that I need to get better quickly. So how can I learn as quickly as possible?
So, at this point, are you bootstrapped? Had you raised a round at all, or how are you um, taking these next steps? Because you have to have inventory, you had to build a supply chain, you had to. Just curious how you kind of planned through your way through all of that.
Yeah, so the first inventory was purchased with my savings, and I didn't mention this, but when I was driving around the Boston area, I would also be driving Uber. So I would wake up at like 4. I would drive. I was also training for a 24-hour race at the time. So I would wake up. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3:30. I would then run for a couple of hours, and then I would drive Uber to catch the morning rush. And I would probably do that until like 9 or 10, depending on when traffic ebbed. And then during the middle of the day, when gyms were more open, because they don't really have classes during the middle of the day, because it's usually
Mhm.
towards the beginning of the end of the workday, I would go to the gyms and I would do this during the day. And then I would drive Uber again at night to catch the night rush. And then everything that I made from Uber, I would just put into the company so I could then use that. So I was basically working another job to just help buffer the company's cash reserves because yeah, there weren't a lot when I was starting out the company. So I didn't raise any money for we got to I think 1.5 million in sales before. So I effectively was bootstrapped from 0 to 1.5 million and profitability and cash flow
Nice.
positivity,
Yeah.
which is I didn't appreciate how difficult that was to do at the time.
How rare that is
Yeah,
too. That like
yeah,
no, good on you. That is really hard and really rare to be able to do that. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's I congratulate you on that.
A lot of it, as you know, I think is also the it's the like the psychology experiment that was done on it was the marshmallow test where it's like delayed gratification. Like I don't know if you've come across this, but they took two sets of kids and one group of kids they're like, okay, here's a marshmallow. If I go leave the room for 5 minutes and then come back, I'll give you a second marshmallow. And like half the kids like couldn't do it. They just ate the marshmallow. And then the kids that did, they tracked them over time. And the ones that were able to basically exercise self-restraint and delay the gratification, they ended up having like better life outcomes over the next couple of decades. And that really
Mhm.
is entrepreneurship because
Yeah.
you really, unless you're kind of an outlier, you're not really receiving any of the benefits of your work for probably the first couple of years. And it's really on the tail ends that you start to see those rewards. So you have to
Yeah.
have patience and you have to be willing to bite the bullet and not eat the marshmallow for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and there's a reason that they have this. We hear it all the time, especially in tech. It's the 10-year overnight success.
Yeah.
That's just what it takes. I remember when I started my first business, we kept hearing it takes 5 years to build a business, and then out of the gate, get a few clients, and also, yeah, no, it doesn't. And then 5 years down the road, I'm like, yeah, no, it took 5 years. Like I was making money, but to go from making money like here, there, hustling here and there to actually having a business where you have people and processes and a client list and like everything. No, it takes time, right? And there's no there's no fast way. Like it's just it's always a challenge. I guess there's the ones that they always call the unicorns, but that's why they call them unicorns. It's
Right.
it's such a
Yeah,
rarity,
that's
and
a great point.
I know
Yeah, they
talk
wouldn't be
about that there
unicorns if everyone did that.
exactly. It's and
Yeah,
I know I've said to other entrepreneurs before, it's like it's not a marathon. It's like you're hiking around the globe.
yeah,
Like a marathon is easy compared to this, where you just you have to put one foot in front of the other, and some days are you're so excited, and then there's other days that are hard, and you just kind of go, well, like you can't get too low, can't get too high. You just keep plowing forward,
yeah.
and um yeah, I've never heard of the marshmallow test that you were telling me about it. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure by the time someone came back in the room, I would have 3 marshmallows, and I don't know how I would do it, but I would come up with a way to, convince somebody to,
Yeah.
sell me their marshmallow or something, right? Like,
I
that's
I
funny.
like the hiking around the world. I like it. Reminds me of I've spent a good amount of time hiking, and I would say a similar feeling that I've had hiking that I've had in entrepreneurship is there's this idea of false peaks in hiking where because of where you are, if you're hiking up the shoulder of a mountain, you think that whatever you're coming up on is like the top of the mountain. And
Yeah.
then you get there and then you see that it's actually
The
like much
next.
further off. And I feel
Yeah.
like entrepreneurship in some sense is just an endless process of that where you just go from false peak to false peak where you get to the top of one, you're like, you think when you're going to get there, you're going to be like, I've made it, I'm set, I'm good. And then you get there and you're like, oh, that's actually where I need to go. And then you get to that
Yeah.
one and then you're like, oh, that next one's where I need to go. And it never ends. It never ends.
I've never heard the term false peak before. I'll remember that because I've literally have talked with entrepreneurs before, and we've said that you get to that peak, and then you look, and then there's the next one. I've never actually had a term
Yeah.
for it, but that is exactly how it feels, and it's and the thing the challenging part. I don't know if you're like this, but I'm not very good at celebrating wins. So I if I you just crest that peak, and it's instead of just stopping and celebrating, I'm like, well, here we go. Start marching to the next one. And it's something that I've tried to build in. You have to try and celebrate some of those little wins because they are so hard to get. And I went years with just you push, and you hit that rise, and then you just don't even slow down. Just keep pushing. And it sometimes is
Yeah.
stopping and acknowledging, like, hey, we've done something good here. Is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that there's this duality of you almost have to be in this constant state of or eternal state of dissatisfaction because if you do get to a state where you are content, then you might not have that urge to improve or to do this. And you
Yeah.
need to have something that is driving you. It reminds me of I grew up in New England, so I was a Patriots fan, really a Tom Brady fan more than anything. But when he's asked his famous quote, like, what's his favorite ring? And he says the next one, because he's always looking at that next
Yeah.
one. And I think there is something to that where you have to have, and I hesitate to say dissatisfaction because I think that that might not be the right word, but you need to have something that's like, oh, okay, that's great, but we can do better. Like what's
Yeah.
next? Because that's what drives you forward. And you're right, you have to I definitely have to consciously take a step back and be like, "Oh, this is cool. How far we've come." It's not just about looking at that next false peak, but you can turn around and be like, "Wow, we've actually gone over a lot of a lot of false peaks already." But then you
Yeah.
still have
Yeah.
to turn your attention back to where you need to go and get going.
Yeah, there's no it's I think the number one, I guess, earmark of successful entrepreneurs is they just never quit. They just drive and drive and drive. And um it's just you have to. There's just no way around it.
Yeah.
You have to, like you said, you have to learn a lot of skills too. I'm like you, like I walk into a room and it's not the entire room lights up, right? I'm not the type that'll go in and shake hands. But if I go into a room and it's a networking opportunity, and then I why did I work the room? And I can work it as good as anybody because it's a learned skill. You have to. Um, like being on a podcast like this, like, and when I first started, I've never even thought of it. I was always behind the scenes building stuff. But you got to get a little buzz going. You have to get activity going. It's an opportunity and you grab it and you learn the skill. It's how it's just that entrepreneurs always have to wear multiple hats and get good at a lot of different things. And you don't even have to be elite at anything. You have to be good at a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
And,
100%. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, there's a lot of people who I know have spoken about this, but it's much easier to be good, like very good, say like the top 80% at a couple of different skills, and then you combine those in a unique way rather than trying to be like the best in the world at a single thing. And it's much
yeah.
more, I think it's much more valuable too. Like if you again look at a lot of people who are very successful, like I'll take somebody that comes to mind is like Joe Rogan. He has a very successful podcast. He I think the reason why he is because he is pretty good at comedy. So he's pretty funny and personable, but he can also speak to all these different things. He's not like necessarily the best comedian and he's not necessarily like the most intellectual, but the unique combination of all these different ingredients
Mhm.
allows him to present a product, which is himself, that is uniquely him. And I think that's an important thing. I think that I've learned is that you one should focus on what your competencies are and try to figure out, okay, how can I, with what my strengths are, how can I work these things together in a combination that's really valuable and that
Mhm.
puts me in a position where I can deliver something that other people can't. It gives me some kind of competitive advantage.
And so that kinda naturally, I think, leads into, once here are some of the things that I'm good at, and I can carry our business forward in these ways, um, but I need to fill gaps. I need people that are gonna help build and grow this vision that can do things that I can't do at all, that I am awful at. Um, when did you hire your first staff? Like when did you start to look at, okay, I need a hand to do this, and how did you work your way through? Because that's the first time anyone hires. Um, is I can't I remember, but I don't remember much about it. But it's a real change again. It's something that has to be learned to deal with staff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a completely different skill set, a completely different skill set. I first made a hire, I think 2 years into the business. And at the time, I definitely didn't have the best framework for it or the best like trigger for it. I think now what that would be is this something that sure I can spend my time doing this thing. There's a million things that you can spend your time doing in a business, but is this the best use of my time right now?
Mhm.
And if it's not, then I need to find somebody who hopefully is better than me at doing this thing, who I can delegate this to because my time is better spent elsewhere. I remember
Mhm.
I had this this notion of being like the I almost like it like honor in a sense of packing the boxes. Like I would pack all the orders myself and I would take pride in that. And I remember telling that I was having a conversation with a mentor early on and he was like, that's a horrible use of your time. You should not be packing all of those orders. And I like took pride in the fact that I did that I was that close to the customer experience that I would sit there for hours just packing boxes. And he really made me realize that like, oh yeah, that is something that I could probably hire somebody to do for like $15 an hour. And I'm actually doing a disservice to my company by
Yeah.
spending my time doing that.
Yeah. It's such a challenge to sometimes identify those things. And as an entrepreneur, you want to be involved, and we never seem to have a shortage of get up and go and want to. The challenge, for me a lot of times is I really have to work on not dipping my toe in and not micromanaging and not like because it's that's a hard it's hard to let go sometimes. And but it's different. Suddenly you have people problems, right? But I remember when I started my first business, and I was like, I took, like I started out as a graphic designer. That's what I took in school. And I started my first business and I was the designer. And then a few years later, I'm not doing any. I'm running the business. I have a team of people working for me. We're not really doing, kind of graphic. Now we're doing all these weird interactive video blog things that I'd never done before. And it's such a change because it's like I started with this skill. I started there, and within a few years, it's just full on 100% business owner, full on entrepreneur, full on, and all of that training and everything just got me started. That's all it did.
Yeah.
Was it just got me that little bit of a start, and then after that, you never look back. You can. It's somebody's got to run the business, and it's it falls on my lap, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that reminds me of a reframing that I had that was really helpful, which was starting out. I think if you think of a company as a factory, I was trying to basically run every single position in the factory. I was packing boxes, I was doing customer service, I was trying to do marketing. I was literally trying to do every single position in the factory. And I realized that my job isn't to run every single station in the factory, but my job is to actually build the factory and to get the people to run those stations. Like that is
Mhm.
uniquely my role. And that usually should be the role of the business owner, to architect and to build the business, as opposed to working every single aspect of the business. Because if you spend all your time working in it, then there's nobody building it. There's nobody steering the ship.
Yeah, exactly. So where are you today? Like now that you've got this product out there, is it still like, is it primarily an e-commerce business? Or do you distribute through retail, or where is the business today, and how are you managing that? And I also want to know where you see things going over the next 12, 24 months.
Yeah, so we are primarily e-com right now, and that allows us to still just run it very, very lean. We only have 3 full-time folks, and I'm still in the process of trying to make the company even more lean. And the amount you can do now, like a lot of people will ask me like how many employees you have, and that's kind of a proxy for like how big is the company, like how much revenue it's doing. But the metric that I really think is the most important, or that I like to kind of optimize, is revenue per employee, because that's a great measure of efficiency.
Yeah.
Because you could have a company that's doing $5 million in sales and have 100 employees and being very inefficient, and you could have a company that's doing 5 million sales and have 2 employees and doing the same amount of sales, but very, very different, very,
Yeah.
very different efficiency. So yeah, the goal right now is to continue doing what we're doing, because it's working really well. And ultimately, we will go to retail in some sense, whether that's the Costco's of the world or Targets or Walmart's of the world. But I think there's still a lot of work that we can do on our side before we. I would say that's something that you have to earn, because it's actually much
Hmm.
easier to get on the shelf than it is to get off the shelf. Meaning, it's not that hard for a buyer, like the buyer of Walmart, to be like, hey, I want to take your product on. What is hard is to stay on the shelf once you get on the shelf. And the
Yeah.
more work you can do outside of the store, so the more, say you go on the shelf of, say you have a product and you decide to go into Walmart, but you have zero business outside. So you're just launching the product in Walmart. Well, that means that once you get on the shelf, the clock is ticking, and you have to do a lot to build the brand while you're racing against the clock. And then compare that to, say, you have a $50 million business before you go into Walmart. Well, then by that time, a lot of people already know what the business is, and they're like, oh, I already get that product from XYZ wherever, and now it's in Walmart, so I'm just going to get it from Walmart. So there's a lot less
Hmm.
like activation energy you have to commit once you're in there. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I think about it. And I know that there's like, the more we can do outside before we go into those larger opportunities, the easier those opportunities will be once we go into them. And over the next 12, 24 months, I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening right now with consumers and what people are looking for. Like, people are seeking out products more than ever that don't have sugar. We don't have any sugar. That don't have seed oils. We don't have any seed oils. That have protein. We have protein. That are clean ingredients. That's like, we check kind of every single box that people are looking for right now. And we actually go above and beyond that. We just completed a clinical study, which I was drafting up the results of earlier, which were really, really cool results. And I don't know of many other food companies that do clinical studies on their product,
Hmm.
but I just am so I'm so like motivated and just want to make sure that consumers know that we are doing everything that we can to make the best product possible for
Mhm.
them, because unfortunately there are a lot of companies that don't necessarily do that. So I'm excited to just keep building what we're building, and yeah, just taking it day by day. I'm excited when I wake up in the morning. I go to sleep at night excited to open my eyes in the morning, which I think is a
Yeah.
good place to be.
Yeah. Well, and going back 10 years, the world I think was quite different. And and I when I started Dryrun, which is the company I've got now, uh, it was all remote, and it's like let's run it lean. And and there were things that especially back then that would how big's your team, where's your office, all the it was such a different culture, and you kind of got this weird look, right? And then it's all changed. And now it's lean is really great. Remote is really great. Profit was literally a bad word not that many years ago for people that weren't running the business, just investors and things.
Yeah.
Profit's a good word now. And so yeah, you're and also there was always this relentless speed, speed, speed. And I think that's also been shown to be really flawed. And I really applaud you for recognizing, we're not going in there until we can be successful, because, you've learned from other people's mistakes. Like you said, that's the number, it's such a valuable thing. And this is why, like, I listen to podcasts, and I hope people listening to us, this is where you pick a lot of these things up. Like when I'm interviewing other entrepreneurs, half the time I forget I'm recording and I'm asking questions and going, "Oh yeah, that's smart." I'm almost taking
Mhm.
notes of like, "Oh yeah, I'm recording. I don't need to take notes." But it's yeah, just so many lessons that we can share with each other. And yeah, you've really got I think made some really smart choices here that uh, I'm looking forward to watching you and seeing where Atlas bars go, because I think it's only on the way up.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I actually I don't even know how many like uh, I feel like it's hard to give yourself a lot of credit as an entrepreneur, because I just look at all the mistakes. I'm like, man, I don't even know how we're still standing. Look at all the mistakes that I've made. But I think the key is, as you said, if you're learning from those, then you just become like, when I think about how I thought about things and how I process things when I started compared to now, I could, even though we were fairly successful quickly, I know that I could do this again and get from, I could probably compress like the first 5 years of the business into a year now,
Mhm.
because of all of the
Yeah.
scars and all of the learnings that I've had. And I think one other thing that really, like, I underestimated the importance of is the difference between like intellectually understanding something and the difference between actually having that lived experience. And an example would
Knowing it.
be like, you can understand in a classroom that, like, yeah, the company can't run out of money, like cash flow is important, but that's very different than if you are looking at your bank balance and you're like, we can't make payroll tomorrow. Because in the classroom setting, you don't feel all the emotions that come with that. You don't
Yeah.
feel the fear, you don't feel the dread. And I think that dread and that fear, those very strong emotions, it programs that lesson into you in a way that you just don't get that same programming in the classroom setting. So, as much as
Mhm.
I tried to front load my learning by reading all these books, there are certain lessons that I really didn't learn until I experienced them myself. And I was like, I'm never going to make that mistake again.
Yeah, it's that feeling, it's the difference between knowing and understanding, and it's
Yeah.
you learn by doing, and, it's like this is episode 82 of just like this podcast, right? And uh, one entrepreneur I remember out of 82, uh, actually had something start and run through and finish really fast. Everybody else is like just exactly what you said, including me. It's like, I don't know how we're alive, how we made so many mistakes. We almost died 15 times. We're probably 3 months from our next dumb mistake, right? Or whatever. Um, and even that entrepreneur, he said, "Yeah, Because I didn't realize what kind of tailwinds we had. It just was such a fluke with timing. And he
Yeah.
said, after we sold that company, I got the same group together and I said, 18 months, guys, let's do it again. And he said, 7 years later, they barely scraped by. And he just said, he goes, never happened again. And he'd been through 3 or 4 different,
Wow.
but he goes, it never happened again. But I understand now it just was this very unique timing and luck, and everything kind of came together
Yeah.
because you can't manufacture that, right?
Right.
It's and that's the over the years that I think I've started to appreciate more and more when I have conversations with other entrepreneurs, and less with experts. And I over the years I talked to so many, a lot of times probably they're experts, but they hadn't done it. It was like the book learning side, and very confident. They have a system, you know, and entrepreneurs so often they've been through the grinder, and it's usually fairly subtle. It's like, well, no, I know I tried this and it just didn't work or whatever. And then I look back over the years and I'm like, oh man, if I would have recognized some of these things, but it was like if I would have recognized the whisper from someone that's been there rather than the yell from somebody that hasn't,
Yeah.
there would have been a few more shortcuts mixed into there. And
Totally.
it's so I just love talking with entrepreneurs. So how can this has been great, James? A really interesting conversation. How do people find you if they want to get in touch with you? How do they find, especially by your bars? How should they track you down?
Atlas Bars on socials. Our website is Atlas Bars. If you search Atlas Bars on Amazon, we'll come up. So yeah, if you basically just type Atlas Bars anywhere, you'll probably find us. And yeah, no, I really appreciate the conversation. I feel like I get something out of every conversation I have like this, and I try to learn as much as I possibly can. There's a quote that I love by, I think it's Ralph Waldo Emerson, that's something to the effect of, every person I meet is my superior in some way, and in that I
Mm,
try to learn from them. And I love that because it's so true. You can, if you're
yeah.
open minded and if you're curious, you can learn something from every person that you interact with. And I feel like I've absolutely done that with the time we've had here. So I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you, James. And curiosity is such a yeah, it's such an important tool and toolkit for entrepreneurs, and just yeah, we have to help each other because there's no one else out there lining up to help us. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's I always find, if nothing else, it just lifts me up to know someone else is fighting the same fight, and that's always it's a hard, but I don't think any of us would do anything else though either. So
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot of other people hiking those false peaks, even though it may not always feel like it.
yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much, James. This was a really terrific conversation. I really appreciate you being on the show.
100%. Happy to be here. Thank you again.
And for those of you out there, if any of you is on a finance team and you guys are buried in spreadsheets, please come see us at dryrun.com, especially if you're dealing with cash flow, with scenario modeling, figuring out where your business is going. We're going to give your management team clarity. We're going to save you a ton of time, bring some accuracy into the equation, and help you move your business forward. Come visit us at dryrun.com. Thanks so much, James.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.